All right, here we go, part 2 of the data types note. So it says variable declarations. In many programming languages, including Java, you must set aside places in memory for variables you want to use in your program by declaring them. Many other languages require you to initialize them and give them a starting value as well. And that's not necessarily true in Java. But what that looks like in Java, the idea of declaring a variable is it has the keyword data type and then whatever the variable name is. So the word data type, well, data type is just one of the keywords above, the one of the Java keywords above. And what I mean there is one of these words here, one of these words. And we'll see this in action soon. So we mean int or float or whatever. And then variable name is something we choose. Is, well, it's the variable name. That we choose. And we want to choose what are called meaningful variables. It's not like math class where it's just X or just T or something like that. We need it to be able to read it nicely. So we use things like value, not just V, okay, etc. And note the camel case. So variable names, and in Java, have this idea of the camel case where it starts with a low letter and then every word has a capital. It's like there's little bumps like a camel. That's called camel case. Variable name. And so instead of spaces or underscores or stuff, we have this camel case. And it's not like you have to be like that, but that's what we often do. It's what's called a convention. It's a naming convention. Okay, so, and it says over here, note that every Java statement ends with a semicolon. So here's an example. So I'm going to get to that at some point. Maybe you've already got it fired up, but fire ready up, and we're going to have a new HSA console application. I'm just going to call it data types, and we may or may not save this at the end. It doesn't matter. Data types. There it is. And there's all this other junk that sort of is built in, but the example that we had was int, and notice how it kind of changed colors there. That means it recognized it when it went bold like that. All those bold letters are Java keywords, so Java recognized that. And when it's blue, it doesn't recognize it. So number of hours, and then it ends with a semicolon. Right, so that's a statement, and we could run the program, but it stopped, finish execution, it didn't do anything. All it did was set aside this spot in memory. It didn't actually do anything. And note the camel case there, the capital O, capital H, number of hours. It wasn't just N, but pretty boring program. It never did anything. And notice for strings, string is a little bit different. See how it's not bold? That means it's a little different than an integer, but it'll still act the same way. Employee name. And again, to save this, save it wherever, you save it in your programs file, your notes file. I'm just going to save it on my desktop for now, and then run it. Again, nothing happens because we're not doing anything yet. The fun stuff comes later. So back to the note. Back to the note here. Anything interesting to write? No, this is all good, all good. Now, variable assignment. The idea is once we've got something put in memory, we can start filling the memory hole with what it's equal to. So, for instance, in our we might have now number of hours equals 15. Again, we're not doing anything yet, so it's not going to, program's still not going to do anything, but it's fine. Now notice that what would happen, and this will be something that we're going to get used to, what would happen if we goof this up and we tried to put 15 into a variable that hadn't been declared. These two things have been declared. I'm going to go stop and run. Well, it gives me an error. And maybe you've already had a little bit of experience, but it says there was one error, and it says no field name variable name was found in data types. So it's telling you, listen, dummy, you didn't declare this variable. You need to declare this variable. And you're going to, part of programming is goofing up and finding errors and that sort of thing. So get used to errors. They're a part of the learning process. And so, I mean, maybe at one point you forgot to put, maybe you did this. Maybe you forgot to put a semicolon at the end. Every Java statement ends with a semicolon. And that's an error message. It'll say semicolon inserted to complete local variable declaration statement. So, okay, yeah, we got to put that in there, and now it'll run. Notice that all these statements, hourly wage equals 12.25, well, that would have to be declared too. But I could use what's called a compound statement. This compound statement, this part declares the variable, sets aside some memory, and this one assigns the value, what's called a compound statement. Notice the green stuff are comments, and we'll talk more about comments soon. The 2 slashes shows a comment. But now if I were to run this, yeah, no problem. It's been declared and assigned all in one step. Still not doing anything because we're not printing anything off. Back to the note. No, not that note. Where's my note? There's my note. These variables would have to be declared, and we saw that error statement. We can combine declaration and assignment in one statement, and there's a couple of examples. We could have had 2 of these statements if we like, but sometimes the Java token new is including when assigning strings. So this idea here is actually the same or very similar to the same thing as there. And why the word new? Well, that's got to do with how strings are a little bit different than ints and floats and that sort of thing. What starts making our programs a little more fun is when we start getting stuff from the keyboard. So for instance, this right here, employee name equals c.readString. So let's try that. And I'm going to put that in there. Employee name equals c.readString. Right? And that'll work because their employee name has been declared, and there we're going to read. So let's run that. It's just flashing, but let's just enter that. And so that worked. Notice that here, when it just was that flashing cursor, that was not very user-friendly, because how is the user supposed to know to enter their name? Right? And so what would be better is if you had what's called a prompt that gets the user some idea of what you want them to do. So it says, no, readString is a method that is included in the ready-to-program IDE. So this readString business isn't really in a Java thing, that if you're to go out in the real world and use Java in the real world, readString isn't really a thing. It's included in ready. It makes ready worthwhile for learning in high school. Later, so this is later in the course, we'll see how awful reading information from the keyboard is in Java. It's a pain in the butt. All right, so we said that this isn't user-friendly. So what we might want to do is print a little message that'll help the person understand what to what to write. So I'm just gonna actually copy this from my note, put it in ready, and see if this is a little bit nicer, right? Okay. So it's going to say c.println, please enter your name, c.read string, and then it's going to do a little bit of output too. We should save fairly often, folks, in case there's a problem. So it says please enter your name. So Ferd. Hello, Ferd. Oh, that doesn't look very nice. I should probably try and fix that up. There should be a space in there. And then that means I have to sort of fix that a little bit. And maybe I would like to put an exclamation point on the end of Ferd's name to make it sound like a sentence. The plus sign sort of puts strings together, and now that might look a little bit better. Ah, that does look a little bit better, and you see now you're starting to get the idea of computer programming. Is you do something, it doesn't look a little bit right, you fix it, you run it again, you fix and run and back and forth. Dandy. Okay, just for a second, I want you to pause the video and answer the question that's coming up in the note. Question: what's the difference between read string and read line? All right. Well, you've pause the video, like I said, and play around with those two commands and see if you can figure it out. All right, I'm guessing that you tried that. The answer is, hopefully you got the answer, c.readString, read string, reads one word at a time. But read line reads input until enter is pressed. So if you only want to read one word, then you're using read string, one string, but read line is everything until you press enter, which is often what we want to do. We want to let the person press enter. All right, let's keep going. We're almost done here. It's 12-minute videos. We don't like having that long a lesson. I want to get you at it. But comments on comments. Comments help us understand variables, code, and programs. Comments should appear at the beginning of the program, so we should have what's called a header at the beginning of every single program that you're going to save from now on, all the way up here. One of this little crappy one is included, but we should have something that's a little bit longer than that. Data types class. Purpose is this is to introduce data types. Author would be you or me or whoever. The version, probably just the date is good. Whatever the date is, just put that in there instead of a version number. And then that sort of tells everybody when they open your program what's going on. And then it also says we should have comments to explain the use and meaning of variables. So back in our program, we'd have here, explaining what these things are for calculation or whatever it is. I'm making this up because this program's not doing much. But and then we should also, for that it says, for explain chunks of codes and individual lines of code when they're difficult. So this part prompts user for their name and outputs a message. And as our programs grow in scope, it's going to be important for you to use comments not only to break up your program so it's easier to read, but also to communicate to yourself later about what you were thinking when you wrote that piece of code. Okay, very important comments, and we will talk about comments more and more and get used to including comments when you're writing your code. All right, that's all I have to say about that. And I think the next thing, if I remember, first of all, save your note, save. But then back on the lesson, there is another file, another RTF file on Edmodo where you will download that and go through some exercises and then resave that in your notes file. All right, that's all I have to say about that. Have fun.